All right, welcome to a brief presentation on growth happening in the town of Berwick. This first slide, so because the impetus for the discussion on town growth really comes from the increased taxes, also kids being in the school system, there does seem to be this narrative that the pupils in the school system has been ever increasing and even increasing at an uncontrolled rate. But as you can see, from 2002 to about 2012, there's actually a decrease of about 200 students. Now, there has been an uptick of kids in the school system in the last couple years, because what you see in the graph is based off a 3-year average. So there's actually 1,340 students, and we'll get into what happened with buildings and building permits and whatnot. Just a note that from 2002 to 2012, where the population went down 200 students, the overall cost actually went up almost $6 million. So why education costs have gone up? It could be special education. It could be because the state isn't funding at a 55% level. In technology costs, there are legitimate reasons why costs increased, and it's not necessarily caused by kids in the school system, although it obviously is a contributing factor. Now, what you see on this chart here is the blue line, there was a huge jump from 2012 to 2013 in the share over the overall cost. So the overall cost of the 3 districts went up, but also the percentage costs. So you see in the bottom right graph there, that Berwick is paying about 2.5% more of the share. And it's not because of the extra kids in the school system, it's actually because right around, when you see on the top right graph there, in 2012, that is when Berwick caught up to North Berwick in overall town valuation. And again, there's other factors for town valuation of, how Berwick caught up. There's still research that needs to be done, but obviously a big factor is the single family houses in Berwick will contribute to that overall town valuation. So this slide to the left is probably the most controversial thing I could bring up today, and this is what the whole uproar kind of was about over the past couple of months, is that Berwick was looking into the overall contribution, including what the town is getting with the subsidy. And Berwick was just legitimately looking at what was happening. And, we went through the ringer, we looked at all the data, and we found out that, with the subsidy and with the cost, Berwick is about paying for what the overall expense is. Berwick provides about 45% of the students, and 45% of the costs are covered through the subsidy and what the towns contribute. Now you look at the graph to the right, and you see the cost per student has actually been pretty fair over the years. North Berwick does pay more per student, but the overall cost based off of the amount of pupils is hugely offset by the subsidies we get. Now we get more into the actual growth of the town by houses built. So you see 1998 was right around the .com bust, and you see there's a little bit of a recovery. In 2003, 2004, there were growth provisions put in, and that drastically reduced the permits for a while. I do have a question where I don't exactly remember when Berwick put a cap on the permits, and there were people lined up outside. I don't know if that was in the past 20 years or not. But you do see the housing crash where it goes from 68 permits to, whatever it was. And we're not expected to ever really see those early 2000 numbers again. because those people were getting loans like they're handing them out like candy. We do see a spike from 16 to 17, where realistically a lot of the building permits were issued in 16. So, I mean, while there is a jump, you could say that it could be split between 16 and 17. You're not really seeing just this magical jump in 2017. So we know we have growth over time. The question is where the growth is happening. We have zoning districts. We have aquifer protection, which is AP, which is 2.75 acre minimum lot sizes. R3 is about 2 acre. R3 is supposed to be our rural residential. We have rural commercial industrial, which is really where we've identified for future commercial growth. We have commercial industrial, which is basically downtown Berwick. And we have transitional residential, which is R2. And then we have our more like downtown-ish residential, which is R1, our dense residential. A lot of us were kind of surprised that R3 is the carries half of the growth, because it is supposed to be our rural district. But when you look at it, R3 covers maybe 2/3 of the land, maybe even higher, maybe even 70% of the land. So in that case, it's not. But the planning board is looking at encouraging growth more in R1, and CI district as much as possible. And this graph, it shows a lot. So the darker the red, and there's actually a legend towards the bottom right. The darker the red indicates it's a heat map. So the darker the red, the more growth there is. Not surprisingly, there is actually the darkest red is in our downtown area, where this is the growth over the past 20 years. And you see that between the Dobson area and Ireland Drive, things like that, those areas combined, there's 87 residences. Those were our biggest subdivisions. And you can see there in the center area, there's another hotspot where that's actually more to the R2 and R3 areas. And like the previous slide said, the majority of our growth is happening in the R3 areas. If you look at the bold part, where it's 5 to 9 residences per map, so there's 79 different maps, and those are the rectangle areas you see, the little shapes. What's happening is you'll have 1 or 2 houses go in every 3 or 4 years, and they're all over the map. The majority of our growth comes from small 1 or 2 house developments and not major subdivisions.